On the 19th of June, 2020, a man leaves Germany. He travels to Austria, from Austria to Belarus, from Belarus to Russia. He has been the chief operating officer of one of Germany's 30 largest public companies, and by the end of that week, that company will no longer exist. The day before he left, auditors had gone looking for 1.9 billion euros the company said was sitting in trust accounts in the Philippines. The money was not there. It had never been there. The bank documents describing it were forgeries. 2 years earlier, that same company had joined the DAX, the index of Germany's 30 most important listed businesses. To make room for it, they removed Commerzbank, a bank founded in 1870, replaced by a payments company from a suburb of Munich. This is the story of Wirecard, and the reason it is not just another accounting fraud is what happened in the middle of it. When a journalist got close to the truth, and Germany's financial regulator responded by going after the journalist. To understand why Germany believed in Wirecard, you have to understand what Germany wanted. Germany makes extraordinary physical things: cars, machine tools, chemicals, precision engineering. What Germany did not have and badly wanted was a technology champion. No German Google, no German Amazon, an entire economy watching the most valuable industry of the century get built somewhere else. And then there was Wirecard. It processed electronic payments. Every time a card was tapped somewhere in its network, a fraction of a cent moved to Aschheim. It was growing fast, it was profitable, it was German, and it was digital. It was exactly the company the country had been waiting for. In September 2018, Wirecard entered the DAX. Commerzbank went out. At its peak, Wirecard was worth more than Deutsche Bank. Think about what that means. The German stock market had decided that a payments processor most people had never heard of was more valuable than the country's largest bank. Now here is the part of the business that mattered, and almost nobody looked at it closely. A significant share of Wirecard's reported profit did not come from Wirecard. It came from what the company called third-party partners, independent businesses in Asia that processed payments on Wirecard's behalf and passed the profits back. Wirecard's explanation for this was reasonable on its face. There are places and there are industries where a European company cannot easily hold a payments license, so you work with a local partner who can. The consequence is that your most profitable business sits inside companies you do not own, in jurisdictions that are hard to inspect, and the cash they generate does not sit in your bank account. It sits with a trustee on your behalf. Money you cannot see, generated by companies you cannot visit, confirmed by documents you have to take on trust. In the accounts, that is a number like any other. In reality, it is a promise. In 2015, a journalist at the Financial Times in London named Dan McCrum started looking at Wirecard's accounts. He would keep looking for about 5 years. What he found over time was a pattern that never resolved. Subsidiaries whose reported revenue did not match anything observable on the ground, acquisitions at prices that made no sense, and eventually, documents from a whistleblower in Singapore describing how the numbers were being produced. Reporting on a fraud is not like reporting on an event. There is no moment where somebody confirms it. There is only an accumulation of things that cannot all be true at the same time, and the slow, unglamorous work of proving each one. Every time the FT published, the share price fell, and every time Wirecard said the same thing. This is a smear campaign, coordinated with short sellers who profit when the stock goes down. That defense had a particular power in Germany. Short sellers are widely disliked. A foreign newspaper attacking a German national champion, in league with speculators betting against it, that story was easy to believe, because a great many people wanted to believe it. It should also be said what this cost. Journalists working on Wirecard were followed. They were the target of surveillance operations and of a sustained campaign to discredit them personally. For 5 years, McCrum was a reporter publishing serious allegations against one of the most admired companies in Europe, being told by almost everyone that he was wrong. The pressure was not incidental to the fraud. It was part of how the fraud survived. And it worked. Retail investors believed the company. The German financial press largely believed the company. Fund managers believed the company. Politicians believed the company. And critically, so did the regulator. In February 2019, BaFin, Germany's Federal Financial Supervisory Authority, took two decisions. The first, it banned short selling of Wirecard shares from the 18th of February to the 18th of April, 2 months during which it was illegal to bet against this one company. It was the first time in the regulator's history that it had done that for a single firm. The second decision, BaFin filed criminal complaints against the Financial Times journalists, Dan McCrum and Stefania Palma, on suspicion of market manipulation. The stated concern was a threat to confidence in the German market. I want to make sure this lands, because it is the center of the story. Germany's financial regulator was looking at a situation where a newspaper was publishing detailed allegations of fraud at a listed company. There were two possible readings. Either the newspaper was right or the company was right. It chose. It made it illegal to bet against the company, and it referred the journalists to prosecutors. The European Securities Regulator, ESMA, issued a positive opinion on the short-selling ban. 16 months later, 1.9 billion euros were missing, the journalists were vindicated, and the chief operating officer was in Moscow. In September 2020, BaFin informed prosecutors that it had no objection to closing the investigation into the reporters. There is a lesson here that is bigger than one regulator having a bad 2 years, and it is worth saying plainly. Institutions rarely fail by being corrupt. They fail by being certain. BaFin was not paid to protect Wirecard. It simply could not seriously entertain the possibility that a DAX company, audited by one of the 4 largest accounting firms in the world, was substantially fictional. The alternative explanation, foreign journalists and speculators attacking a German success story, required no revision of anything it already believed. That is what made it so easy to accept. By 2020, the pressure had become impossible to contain. So Wirecard did something that was meant to end the argument permanently. It commissioned an independent special audit from KPMG and told the market to wait for the result. The company expected to be cleared. KPMG reported that it could not verify a substantial part of the company's revenue. Read that carefully, because the wording matters. Not that the revenue was fake, that the evidence needed to confirm it had not been provided. For a business whose entire defense was, the money is there, you just cannot see it, that was the worst possible outcome, and the share price understood it immediately. On the 18th of June 2020, Wirecard's auditors, EY, refused to sign off the accounts. The reason was specific. 1.9 billion euros were supposed to be sitting in trust accounts at 2 banks in the Philippines. EY had asked those banks to confirm it. The banks, BPI and BDO, said the documents were fake, not that the balance had moved. Not that there had been an accounting error, that the paperwork describing the accounts had been fabricated. What follows is one of the fastest collapses of a major European company on record. The 19th of June, Jan Marsalek leaves the country. The 22nd of June, Wirecard publicly acknowledges that the 1.9 billion euros probably does not exist and probably never did. The 25th of June, the company files for insolvency. A DAX company, 7 days. Markus Braun, the chief executive, was arrested in June 2020. And now the part of this story that stopped being about finance. Jan Marsalek was never found. He is believed to be living in Moscow, according to investigative reporting openly. Investigations by The Insider, Bellingcat, and Radio Free Europe have reported that Marsalek was recruited by the GRU, Russian military intelligence, roughly a decade before Wirecard collapsed, that he opened doors for Russian intelligence in Libya, and that money moved out of Wirecard helped fund Russian operations in Syria. These are journalistic findings, not court verdicts. Marsalek has never stood trial. British prosecutors have accused him of running a Russian spy network operating in London, which surveilled people the Kremlin regarded as enemies, including Christo Grozev, the Bellingcat investigator who had spent years identifying Russian intelligence officers. In Vienna, an associate named Egisto Ott is alleged to have obtained the phones of 3 former officials from Austria's Interior Ministry, which raises a question nobody has fully answered. Was Wirecard a payments company that happened to employ a Russian agent? Or was a payments company embedded in the European financial system, moving large sums through jurisdictions nobody could inspect, useful to somebody for reasons that had nothing to do with payments at all? I am not going to answer that because nobody has proved it. But it is the question Germany's parliamentary inquiry ended up circling, and it is why this story has never quite closed. The trial of Markus Braun opened in Munich in December 2022. The charges include commercial gang fraud, accounting falsification, market manipulation, and breach of trust. The maximum sentence is 15 years. Braun denies everything. His position throughout has been that he was a victim of the fraud rather than its architect. The trial has run for more than 260 court sessions, more than 220 witnesses, thousands of documents. As of spring 2026, Markus Braun has been in custody for more than 5.5 years, and there is still no criminal verdict. In a separate civil case, he and 2 other executives were ordered to pay 140 million euros in damages to the insolvency administrator. Everyone else absorbed the rest. Wirecard's shareholders included a very large number of ordinary German savers who had been encouraged for years to believe this was the safest kind of growth stock there was, a national champion in the DAX, audited by a major firm, defended by the regulator itself. Their holdings went to nothing. BaFin was restructured afterwards, and its president replaced. Germany tightened its audit rules. That is what institutional accountability tends to look like. Reorganization, some years later, of the body that got it wrong. So here is where it stands. The 1.9 billion euros never existed. The company is gone. The savers lost what they put in. The man accused of running the fraud has been in a cell for more than 5 years without a verdict. The man who fled is reportedly walking around Moscow. And the journalist who was right had criminal complaints filed against him by the regulator whose job it was to catch this. The thing to take from Wirecard is not that fraud happens. Fraud always happens. It is that the system's defenses did work. A journalist did the job correctly for 5 years and published the truth in a major newspaper 16 months before the collapse. It was not hidden. It was reported. And then it was prosecuted.